How far away?
Up at that point.
Yes. How far away from a partnership point of view? Yeah.
We're all right. I can see you.
Yeah. Okay.
We just wait for the last few people to come and get a seat. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for choosing to come and listen to us. As will become patently obvious, this is not a sales pitch. It's not a finished project. In fact, it's barely a finished presentation. But we hope that you enjoy it. Who has the clicker? I've never asked that. Have you got the clicker?
You take control.
As I said, barely finished presentation. Okay. So who are we? Well, Edinburgh Napier is one of 5 universities in Edinburgh. #1 for student satisfaction for another year running. I just have to get that in there for those who are here from Heriot Watt and other universities in Edinburgh. We have 3 campuses in the centre of town, and we have a global online and transnational portfolio as well. We are postmodern, and because of that, we try to spend our money wisely. And that's part of our relationship with CGI. Now, CGI is an organisation that many of you will never have heard of. I didn't know that they ran the IT in my local council, and in fact, many of the councils in Scotland. But as you probably heard yesterday in one of the buzzer pitches, they are one of the biggest consultancies in the world. And that's why we added them to our portfolio of strategic partners. So that picture up there was the day that we signed our formal partnership agreement in 2024. But we'd been working together on a memorandum of understanding for several months, and actually a couple of years before that. When I arrived in Edinburgh Napier, I realised we had some really, really strong strategic partners with a few vendors, particularly in the infrastructure space, and they complemented our very lean IT department. However, the one area we didn't have was in the apps development space, in the digital transformation, and we were introduced to CGI. And so we signed an MOU that was about a two-way street, let's put it that way. So we would buy services from CGI and spend our money wisely, as I said, but they would also buy from us. So they would use our academic research and our academic expertise to complement their skill set, and we've done that in a number of different proofs of concept, particularly around sustainability goals. We also wanted to jointly build things for other people, because the best way to feather your own nest is to get somebody else to pay for it. And there will be opportunities for that in the future. And we wanted to create IP together, and this is an example of creating IP. We are an educational institute. Our product is education and research. And so part of our MOU is that CGI will take our graduates. They will place their graduate level apprenticeships with us. They will look at knowledge transfer partnerships and CPD for their staff and for their client staff. And as of this year, they are funding their first PhD student with us. So it truly is a partnership, and I wanted to get that across to you all. So to cement this partnership, we agreed on a first project. And we wanted a project that would be interesting for us, something that we wouldn't do on our own. Something that would use the emerging technology that was of the moment, and Tom will talk a little bit more about that. Something that we teach our students. So we have expertise in robotics, in AI, in cybersecurity, in extended and virtual reality, but we don't actually use much of that in our corporate systems or on our student systems and what we offer our students to help them in their journey. So we wanted to pick something that would genuinely be innovative and novel and would solve a real-world problem. Something that would create novelty and excitement, which we heard about yesterday. And so we decided we would engage with CGI on this project. And over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Claire. Let me start by telling you a little story. So cast your mind back, if you can, 3 years ago, when ChatGPT was just a mere twinkle in everyone's eye, and the metaverse was riding hard and high on the Gartner hype cycle. Personally, I find that really surprising, actually. 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, people were spending serious amounts of money and time and effort in trying to shape the metaverse and its vision. Mark Zuckerberg, I think, invested something in the region of $40 billion in repackaging Facebook in a virtual environment. Now, in hindsight, we can look back and be wise and say, well, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. But that'd be slightly wrong, because I think there's a lot of practical application with immersive technologies. And by immersive technology, what we're talking about is VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality solutions and systems. And the best way about going about discovering or investigating those types of things is to, on the one hand, embrace the hype, embrace the opportunity and the potential of the new technology, and then on the other hand, bring it back to earth by looking at practical use cases. You know, focus on trying to solve traditional problems or long-term issues in novel ways. And it was for that reason that Edinburgh Napier and CGI decided to join together and create a joined-up program to investigate the use of immersive technology in higher education, particularly to focus on real-world applications that would add real value to what we later called the campus life experience. So, how do we go about it? We started with a 12-week engagement, a discovery engagement. And what we want to do is canvass opinions across all parts of the faculty and the student body. So we did one-to-one interviews, we did group sessions, and in our experience, usually it's best to try and focus on one-to-one, because during the early concept stages, when you're trying to shape an idea or position a vision of what the future might look like, in a group session, the person with the loudest voice tends to carry the crowd. Now, that's great for me, but it doesn't necessarily get you the right outcome, right? So what we wanted to do was to gather all this information together, and as a result of that 12-week engagement, what clearly came through as a finding was the general feeling was student welfare was the most important aspect of campus life at Edinburgh Napier. And so what we did is we collated that information together, and we're able to sort of, at a very high level, map the life of a student from selecting a university like Edinburgh Napier, onboarding, going through 3 years of being an undergraduate, and then postgraduate and alumni experience and all that. And as a result of that, we collated a really large number of use cases, but of the 40 plus that were probably more focused and more relevant, the ones that became the highest priority, the ones that touched upon those first early weeks of onboarding. And that was based on the principle that from a student welfare perspective, how you experience those early weeks will define your career, is that the right word? Career? Journey with university. That will define the rest of that journey. So after a lot of toing and froing and some discussions and so on and so forth, we alighted on, or landed on, an all-encompassing use case. It was an all-encompassing student wayfinder application that would be a one-stop shop for all the information and supporting guidance a student might need, particularly an international student landing in Edinburgh for the first time for the opening weeks of their life at Edinburgh Napier. We would focus on generating content that would be curated by the student body, and we would look to integrate fully with the timetabling system and ultimately provide some sort of pathfinding functionality through augmented reality and other map services. And that's where we ended up after discovery, and it started the journey into building up to prototypes. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Tom. So, we had been funded as part of our partnership for that first piece of discovery, and the next thing I had to do was secure the funding for the prototype. And to do that, I sold a vision to ULT, which in hindsight was perhaps a little ambitious for a prototype, but let me set the scene for you. Merchiston campus is a 1960s tower block surrounding, I think, a 12th century listed tower with various buildings added on over the years. It's a bit of a rabbit warren. There's an 8-foot tower block, an 8-story tower block, blocks with the same numbering system, same level lettering system, it's not even a numbering system, corridors that have the same A or B categorization but are actually a foot different in height and don't connect in any way. And our students find it, our staff find it, after 6 years, still hard to navigate. We put student helpers and helpers like myself around the campus on open days and offer holder days to direct people, because it is difficult to find your way around. So we had quite a difficult scope in terms of the Wayfinder app, but we could really sell this as an idea for open days, offer holder days, and for the longitudinal induction of our students and staff. And so we sold this storyboard of I think it's mom and pop in the middle there, coming to an open day, downloading the app from a poster or being sent it perhaps in the classroom before the event, asking people to download it to their phone, and then they'd be able to use that to navigate their way around the campus. We talked about accessibility, so the campus is not a particularly accessible campus. There's a lot of stairs, there's a lot of lifts. There's lifts that at the time that we were doing this project tended to break down. They've now been refurbished. And so our students were finding it difficult to get from floor to floor if they had any sort of physical disability. And we also talked about being able to signpost to students if anything did happen. So our property and facilities team having a management console where they could say, lift 4 is down, and redirect students, particularly those who needed wheelchair access, for instance, to another part of the building to gain access. So I did sell it. And so we got the funding for the prototype, and that was the storyboard that did it. What we actually built for our showcase prototype is on the screen in front of you. So if I click again, you'll see the video of this is the real life screen capture of the app. So you point your camera at the place you want to go, the red arrows in true Napier branding takes you to the place you want to be, and it actually does work. And if you want to see it, you can see it today because CGI have repurposed our app, added the Brighton Conference Centre as a location, and you can go around the floor outside, and you can see it on the demo phones they've got. We encountered a few technical problems, as you would imagine, early on in the prototype, and one was about location services. Our students don't all switch on their location services on their phone, and we were conscious of that. We were conscious of privacy impact, if we were capturing anything about a student device when they were using it, and importantly, the timing of this project didn't quite coincide with another project that we were intending to do, and did, but separately around IoT and sensors. And we thought we might be able to piggyback on the technology around the sensors in order to help with wayfinding and location of the user. So CGI came up with a wizard wheeze. They came up with the idea of using machine vision to locate the individual, at least for the prototype. So you scan a poster, and there's one up there, or you scan a room number, and we captured all of our room numbers that are in Napier red with white lettering, and captured them in the CMS. And based on that screen capture, you can then select from a pre-defined list of popular locations like the library, the cafe, the front door, the computer center, or from your timetable, you would select which specific classroom you're going to, and then it produces you a wayfinder direction, as it says in that video up there. We also produced a 2D map, and actually the feedback on the 2D map was really positive. But of course, we wanted this to be immersive tech, so we wanted to carry on with the 3D maps as well. So we have the prototype, we've used it with our students, and there's been really positive feedback about the capability. But we have had some technical difficulties we'll talk about as we go. So this is the most important thing for everybody in the room, I think. What have we learned? Because we haven't finished, but we thought that there might be things that we've learned that you would find interesting and useful if you were emerging on a similar project. And so the first thing I would say is really positive. The user research approach that we took at the start of the project was instrumental in getting us to a use case that was actually useful, gathering the feedback from all the different stakeholders and settling on something that we thought was the right sort of size for the first prototype. And CGI brought in an expert in this field who actually is an academic, still an associate professor, I think, at Cardiff, or was.
Yes, is.
Teresa,
yep.
Who came and ran our the user research sessions. In hindsight, and a lot of this is in hindsight, I wish I'd got my service design team involved earlier. Because I think they would have been a good complement to Teresa. But at this time, the project was still being run as a research project, and we didn't really projectize it at that point. But that user research process, and you saw a small sample of the affinity maps, the love-hate statements up there, was really, really powerful. And I would advocate that everybody adopts that approach when they're designing a service. The other thing that was really interesting was the student engagement. So we pay some of our students to come along and give us information. And as Tom said earlier, and this is definitely true, you get one strong voice in those paid-for sessions and everybody follows along like sheep. You don't get counterpoints, you don't get dissenting voices, you get a single view of things. What became really interesting was that we got our user research students, and the professor for user research is up there, Ian Donlan, we're going to hear from him in a minute. We got them involved in the project when I got my service design team involved, because they've got a long-standing relationship with that academic and with the group of students. And we use them actually as a sounding board for a lot of our ideas, because they're heavily invested in the idea of user research. They have a wide variety of views on things. They're very engaging and engaged. And so laterally, we got the user research students involved. And actually, we credited them on the project. Now, one of the things we really wanted to do as part of this project was to get students involved. And Tom mentioned getting them creating some of the content and curating the content going forward. Timing didn't really work, and we'll talk about that as well. But we did get these students involved, and the impact on those students was actually quite profound. They've been credited on the app, they've talked about it on their CVs, they've cited it as projects they were involved in. And again, I would advocate that people do that if they possibly can. And we'll hear from Ian at the end. Another lesson for us is never start a project with your Vice Principal of Research, because he's a busy man and he will step away and leave you holding the baby, which is exactly what happened. So Nick, who's fantastic, and actually if it wasn't for Nick Antonopoulos, our VP for Research, this project would not have started. He's Greek, he's very enthusiastic, he speaks English better than I do, and he convinced everybody to invest in the project initially. But he's not a completer finisher, I would say.
No, just starter.
I found that I was then running this project off the side of my desk, and the lesson for me is I really wished I'd got my colleague Jonathan, who's in the audience, involved earlier on, and had one of his project managers and his user researchers involved, because I did a terrible job of managing this project. And they rescued me several times during it. So I would say get that repeatable project management methodology embedded, even when you're doing something as creative and innovative as this. Scope. As I said, I sold quite a lot to ULT, and we didn't deliver all of that in the prototype because it was just too much. So I think being ambitious about your scope is great, but not being overly ambitious. So we narrowed it to Merchiston campus, which is our most complex campus, which is a double-edged sword. We took out some of the accessibility scope, and we tried to narrow it down to Android devices because we thought one device rather than two device sets, and Tom will talk about the technical constraints that gave us. But I think even still our scope was a little ambitious. It was great because we saw the vision, and actually the Student Association asked me last Monday, when will the Wayfinder app be here? Because will it be ready for the next trimester? And I had to say I wasn't sure. But there's still an ambition to do it, and there's still an interest from our student body to do it. Technical constraints, over to Tom.
Yeah, I think I'll just touch on working together first, because it's the short of the two, and I'm mindful of how much time we have left. I mean, the first thing to say is that right at the start, what was important for CGI and for Edinburgh Napier, that this was going to be a truly joint engagement. So it's not like a bunch of CGI consultants turn up and tell Edinburgh Napier how we're going to build an app. The idea was to have proper student engagement. And originally, probably slightly naively, we thought what we'd do is we would bring some SMEs, like Parisa, who was our UX strategist, and our creative tech dean, and our visual artists and stuff. And then Edinburgh Napier would supply things like testers and service design people and project managers and stuff. And we thought that would be a great idea. And mainly because, from a student perspective, the idea was that they'd have a chance to really work with industry. As an undergraduate, working with real consultants, delivering a project that delivers real value. That's a massive thing to put in your CV and a great experience for any student, right? So super important that was. What CGI failed to understand, and I say CGI collectively, even though it's really me, was actually how difficult it is to align a project or program schedule with the academic year and getting the right people at the right time. So I think if we're going to do this, if we had to repeat this, again, we would plan very hard to fit against the academic year, to get the chance for those people who run the schools and run the lesson and the planning and the learning planning so that we could get that space in the academic schedule so that we could have those people involved in the project. We had some challenges in terms of location. It just so happens, accident of birth, that none of our consultants were based in Scotland. It happens, right? And this is the way it goes. So we have a big, large Scottish operation. Unfortunately, all our immersive tech guys are all based in Wales and southeast of England. That meant we had to travel a lot, particularly in terms of testing. That was challenging, and there were some very, very patient staff members at Edinburgh Napier who were helping us with particularly the Android testing, which we'll come on to in a moment. In summary, the general feeling from CGI was how it was wonderful to work with a bunch of enthusiastic people, whether we're talking about faculty, Nick and his bubbling enthusiasm for stuff, and everybody else. And Claire wasn't a bad project manager at all. And the teams, it was just a great experience for everybody involved. So, yeah, you know, were some problems and challenges, but it was fun, and that's what's really important with these kind of things. Right, technology, by far, I think probably the biggest area here, because obviously the last phase was all about building a technical prototype. And when building a prototype for this type of solution, there are kind of four main challenges that underpin or define the types of experimentation you want to do during your prototype phase. The first challenge is about understanding what pathfinding actually means. So you need to know where you are exactly when you start so that you know how to navigate, how to get to where you want to be at the end. So that is orientation and location. So by location, as in where am I standing, and orientation, which direction I'm going in. Otherwise, the app doesn't know where to take you. That's problem number one. As Claire's already mentioned, we turned off location services from the phones, or never intended to ask the users of the app to turn them on. And that's, I know, not really, it's really an optics point. You know, we don't want the students to think that somehow Big Brother is watching them. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but that's kind of what mindset might be. So we thought, you know what, we'll just ignore that, we won't use that. So we need to find an alternative way of getting navigation working. The second challenge is that navigating indoors versus navigating outdoors requires a much higher degree of fidelity. So we're all used to using Google Maps. You're driving on the road, your phone uses GPS services to triangulate its location, and within 1 or 2 meters, it's accurate. And that's fine when you're on the road. Inside a building, that means you might be in the wrong room, the wrong corridor, in the stairwell. So that fidelity is super important. So what do we do about that? So that then leads on to the next problem. We are then heavily relying on devices. We need the devices of the users to be able to work so that we can track where people are and navigate them effectively. So there are two choices. You either have Apple devices or you have Android devices, essentially. There are others out there, but those are the two main ones. The beauty about Apple devices is they are high quality, very consistent, the technology is good in them, and the software is consistent. Unfortunately, those restrictions make it not a good candidate for a prototype, because they restrict you from being able to upload certain types of apps to the store and so on. So we went with Android. But the benefit of Android is also its curse. Every manufacturer takes advantage of the fact that the platform is open. And at the time of us doing the prototype, there was something like 3,000 potential different mobile devices that we could have potentially been using to use the app. And of those 3,000, 1,500 of them didn't work because their gyroscopic mechanisms weren't good enough for what we wanted to do. So that's the second problem. Also, some of them used to overheat, which is a bit of a nightmare. So those are the first three challenges. The fourth challenge was the one that really underpinned everything else, which is to say that if a solution is not economically viable for the customer, it is not a solution. And the nature of where we were financially, in terms of higher education, meant that money and the cost of setting something up like this was very, very important. There are commercial products out there, not very many, but there are some that do this internal navigation reasonably well. They're designed for warehouses and large supermarkets where the room's shape is not complicated. And they rely on using IoT and beacons to be able to triangulate yourself from your mobile device so you know exactly where you are. That's all great when you've got a nice warehouse, but when you have Merchiston campus with 7 floors and 400 plus rooms, that becomes massively expensive, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. So clearly that was not going to be viable for us. We had to find an alternative way of navigating that didn't use beacons at the start with, anyway. And that's where we came up with the idea of using machine vision and that. And that was a fantastic find or innovative idea from our creative tech who came up with the idea, and it was great. What was the final point I want to say on here? There were some challenges, though. So with the problems with the Android devices, we thought, well, you know what, we'll just build the app in Apple, it'll be fine. It then transpired that we were using Unity as the platform for the app, for the purpose of the prototype, and it was incompatible with iOS for the purposes of the machine vision piece. So that's not a challenge for the next phase, but it is a challenge for the prototype. The next phase, we weren't going to build it in Unity anyway. We're going to build it some sort of JavaScript, mobile-friendly application. But it meant that it made it a problem for the purposes of showcasing it or accessing it like that. But the result of all that testing, the result of all the technology challenges we now know what works and what doesn't work. And really, the next stage for us will be looking at some sort of hybrid model with a small number of beacons or IoT, just to get the experience good, and then using a combination of 3D mapping and also machine vision to set up a solution. I think that's probably enough.
Thanks, Tom. And
4 minutes left.
People can come and talk to you about the technical issues if they want
yes.
to. I guess the last point is look and feel. If you see the app, it's completely on brand for Napier. It's beautiful, it's very user-friendly, and it's completely accessible. And I think that's a positive to end on in terms of our lessons learned. We built something that's really nice, really usable, and looks nice. In terms of next steps then, in fact, no, I want to let...
Wayfinder app is
hear
an
from Ian.
application that is designed to engage with the latest technology, in this case augmented reality, and apply it to something really simple, which is finding your way around the university. Napier has a long history of leading in service design, both in its programs and its academics. Our students got to see that process from both the professional services side and with some help from the academic side. They got to engage with developing storyboards, creating empathy maps, design sketches to actually elevate the product from a concept through to...
Oh, what happened there?
I don't know, but I'll try clicking it again. No, I don't know why. Ian got cut off.
I think he finished with, it was amazing, what a great experience, thank you very much.
I think
I think that's what he said.
We'll assume that it was all fabulous and the students mentioned it several times in their CVs.
Yeah.
So, next steps. Well, we don't know yet, because I need to go and sell this idea again to ULT. But we know that as we take it forward, and I do have an idea about that, we'll do some more user testing and research and make sure that this is definitely what we want to develop. Retooling and lab testing, as you mentioned, Tom. We want to add those accessible routes in and those accessibility settings. And we want to integrate it with our timetabling. We use Technology One for timetabling, and we want to be able to click straight through from a tile on the My Napier Campus M app, from timetabling straight into the app to then, so it's not a separate thing on phones, it's part of our branded app for students. And lastly, we want to build that management console so our colleagues who look after the campus can tell us if something is not right about the campus. And my idea is, because I got lots of interest about this at dinner last night and as we were walking around yesterday, there's a few universities who are really interested in this if they've got the sort of complex estates we have. If any of them want to talk to us about forming some sort of consortia to take this forward, I think that might be a really interesting and cost-effective way to do it. So, white jacket, find me wandering around, go and talk to CGI at their stand. It might be a way forward.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go stand over here, shall I?
So thank you so much, Claire and Tom, for that presentation. I know we are kind of in transition time and we might get some individuals coming back from the other partner showcases, but I just wondered, whilst we have that minute, whilst we're waiting for everyone to rejoin, whether there are any questions from the audience at all. Please put your hand up if you have a question. If not, I have one that I can segue in. Oh, I think we've got one question at the front. If you can just say who you are and which institution, that'd be great. Thank you.
It's a bit of a giveaway there. I'm Simon Williams from CGI. Oh. But I was really interested in there are a lot of institutions here that are in flight with Smart Campus and so on. You mentioned something called machine vision as a solution. I know when we originally started this project, we were looking at IoT, beacons, sensors, and so on. I actually, myself, would like to understand a bit more about how machine vision solved that problem.
Thank you, Simon. That wasn't a rehearsed question. The challenge for us was, because we couldn't use beacons or location services, you have to find it's not magic, the phone. It doesn't know where you are, and it doesn't map you to the app. So what you need to do is find your location and your orientation. And the way we discovered to do that was by machine vision, was the ability for the app to be able to recognize the numbering. So you saw on a video briefly that every single room has a sort of unique number and letter against it. And we literally went through it and taught the app to recognize every single room in Merchanton. And so what you could do is you just walk up as a student, you walk up to the door, and you literally just point the app at the door, and it would recognize where you were and go, oh, you're right here. And therefore map you on the virtual, pin your location on the virtual map, and then be able to guide you to the next location you want to go to. Now, it's quite a different way to explain it. We do actually have the app here at CGI, and you can see it working there. And we've used the original machine vision thing with 4 posters, so you can see it working and how it ties together. Awesome.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? I will just check. Yeah, okay, we can take one more. So are there any other questions in the room? Oh, there's one over there. Brilliant, thank you.
Hi, Claire. Great to see you again, and fascinating stuff. I suppose it's more of a logistical question. Was this a standalone app? Did it stand alone?
It's standalone at the moment.
Right.
I think is that David?
It is.
Hi. It's standalone at the moment because it's part of the prototype. But the intention is we have the Ex Libris Campus M app, which we call My Napier, with the branded tiles that takes people to their Outlook or the timetabling app or their exam results. And the intention was to have it as a tile within that app, and also to integrate it so if you're in the timetabling app on your phone and you knew that you were to go to D37, you would simply click it and the app would open and take you there. So it's standalone right now, but the intention was always to make it part of the student system ecosystem.
Great.
Thank you. I can see there's lots of people coming back into the room now from the other partner showcases. So if you can just please join me to give our thanks and appreciation to Claire and Tom. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.